I thought silence meant weakness. I didn't know silence was a predator sharpening its teeth. I stood on the obsidian platform overlooking the landing bay, my 4 eyes narrowing against the harsh wind that swept across our fortress world. 20 cycles I had served at the military academy, 20 cycles of molding the greatest warriors in 3 sectors, and now I had to babysit humans. The transport ship descended with all the grace of a drunken moth, kicking up red dust that coated my ceremonial armor. I clicked my mandibles in irritation. Humans. The galaxy's newest participants in the Coalition Defense Initiative. The species that had somehow convinced the Council they deserved a spot in advanced military training. I had read the reports, of course. Death world origin, impressive physical endurance, alarming creativity and violence, but reports were just data. Data did not prepare you for reality. The cargo ramp dropped with a hydraulic hiss, and the first human bounded out like an over-caffeinated prey animal. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a grin that showed far too many teeth, he was followed by 6 more, each one louder than the last, laughing, shoving each other, pointing at the fortress spires that clawed at the purple sky. They moved like a pack of juvenile predators who had never learned fear, all swagger and noise and chaotic energy. My second-in-command, Lieutenant Kress, leaned closer. Her voice carried the musical chime of our species, but her tone was dry as the wastelands beyond the academy walls. They are enthusiastic, Commander. They are undisciplined. I corrected, watching as one human tried to lift another in some bizarre display of camaraderie. This will be a long semester. But then I noticed her. She stepped off the ramp last, carrying a single pack across her shoulders, while the others gesticulated wildly, voices bouncing off the landing bay walls. She walked in complete silence. Her face was calm, almost blank, dark eyes sweeping across the academy grounds with the methodical precision of a scanner drone. She did not smile, did not shout, did not join the celebration of arrival. She simply observed. I watched her navigate around her boisterous companions, noting how she moved, efficient steps, no wasted motion, maintaining perfect awareness of her surroundings without appearing to try. The contrast was jarring. 7 humans who seemed determined to announce their presence to the entire planet, and one who moved like smoke. That one, Kress said, following my gaze. Mira Chen, according to the manifest. Psychological profile indicates, oh, this is amusing, Commander. They flagged her as potentially unsuitable for frontline command due to introverted tendencies. I clicked my mandibles again, but this time it was thoughtful rather than irritated. Introverted. Unsuitable. The quiet one. I had no idea, not even the faintest whisper of suspicion, that she would become the one to teach us all a lesson we would never forget. The Krellian Military Academy did not believe in gentle introductions. On the first morning, I watched drill instructor Raxthor throw the humans into combat scenarios that typically broke third-year cadets. He was a mountain of chitinous armor and bad attitude, and he expected the soft-fleshed newcomers to crumble before midday meal. He was half right. The loud ones, Marcus Webb and his crew, they attacked every drill like it had personally insulted their ancestors. Webb charged through obstacle courses bellowing what I could only assume were human war cries. His companion Torres turned hand-to-hand combat practice into a theatrical performance, complete with taunts that made even our Krellian cadets pause. They failed repeatedly, but they failed with such aggressive enthusiasm that it was almost impressive. Almost. Mira Chen, though, she barely registered on Raxthor's radar. I observed from my usual position on the observation deck, monitoring all the new cadets, but my attention kept drifting back to her. She completed every drill exactly at the minimum acceptable standard. Not fast enough to stand out, not slow enough to warrant punishment. Her combat scores hovered at precisely average. When Raxthor screamed questions during tactical exercises, demanding split-second responses, she would pause, consider, then offer answers that were technically correct but utterly uninspired. Pathetic, Raxthor announced one morning, his voice echoing across the training ground like thunder. He pointed one clawed appendage at Mira, who stood at attention with that same blank expression she always wore. This one does not even try. Look at her. No fire, no spirit. She stands there like a monument to mediocrity. The Krellian cadets laughed, that chittering, clicking sound that passed for amusement among our kind. I watched from the observation deck as Mira's face remained completely neutral. Not embarrassed, not angry. Just there. Your species sends us their rejects, Commander. Cress asked beside me, making notes on her datapad. The others at least demonstrate passion, however misguided. But this Chen individual, she appears almost broken already. I nodded absently, my focus still on the quiet human below. The Academy had a reputation that stretched across 6 systems. Krellian training broke bodies and rebuilt them stronger. It shattered egos and forged warriors. The culture was brutal by design. Senior cadets were encouraged to test newcomers, to find weaknesses and exploit them. It was not hazing, we insisted. It was preparation for real war, where the enemy would show no mercy. Within the first week, I noticed the senior cadets had identified their target. Mira never fought back when they moved her equipment. Never complained when her ration packs mysteriously vanished. Never reacted when they whispered insults in broken human standard, calling her weak, useless, a waste of oxygen. Webb and the others tried to intervene, but she would shake her head, a tiny gesture, and they would back off, confused, but respectful. She accepts her place. One of the Krellian squad leaders, Thexel, announced proudly during a briefing, I happened to overhear. At least this human understands the natural order. Silence and submission. Perhaps she is not completely worthless, after all. That night, I made a note in my personal log. Human Cadet Chen shows no response to standard pressure tactics. Possibly lacks the psychological resilience for command positions. Recommend remedial confidence training or early dismissal. I would later burn that log entry in shame, but at the time I believed every word I had written. I thought I understood what I was seeing. I thought silence meant defeat. I had never been more wrong about anything in my entire military career. Week 3 was when Thexel and his pack decided that Mira Chen needed to learn her lesson properly. They started small, as predators do. Her bunk assignment mysteriously changed to the coldest corner of the barracks, where the heating vents never quite reached and the metal walls sweated condensation through the night cycle. Her training schedule got reshuffled so she was always last for meals, arriving at the commissary when only the least edible rations remained. Small things. Petty things. Things that added up. I observed it all from my office monitors, sipping my morning stimulant and telling myself this was character building. The strong adapted. The weak washed out. This was the Krellian way. This was how we had trained warriors for generations. But Thexel was not satisfied with small victories. During a night training exercise in the simulation halls, I sat in my office reviewing reports when something made me pull up the security feeds. Call it instinct, call it curiosity, but I switched to the corridor cameras just in time to see 6 senior cadets corner Mira in a dead-end corridor. They did not touch her. Oh no, that would be crossing a line even our academy's brutal culture would not tolerate. But they surrounded her, chittering in our own language, clicking mandibles in threat displays that were biologically hardwired to trigger fear responses in prey species. I leaned closer to the screen, watching. Mira stood there, back against the wall, and stared at each of them in turn. Her face was a mask. Her breathing stayed even. She did not cry. She did not beg. She just, wait. You do not belong here, soft thing, Thexel said in human standard, his translator chip making his voice sound like gravel in a blender. You are prey pretending to be a predator. We see through you. Everyone sees through you. Why do you not just quit and save yourself the humiliation? Mira blinked once, slowly, and said nothing. That silence seemed to enrage Thexel more than any insult could have. He slammed his fist into the wall beside her head, the metal denting with a sound like a gunshot. I watched, waiting for her to flinch, to react, to show something. She did not even blink. Marcus Webb found her 20 minutes later, still standing in that corridor staring at nothing. I switched camera angles to catch the confrontation. He grabbed her shoulders, his face twisted with concern and fury. Chen, that's it. I'm reporting those Katin-covered bullies to Voth right now. This has gone way too far. You don't have to take this. We're supposed to be here together and… No. It was the first word she had spoken in 3 days. Quiet. Firm. Final. No? Webb looked like she had slapped him. Mira, they're targeting you specifically. They're trying to break you. We can't just let them. I said no, Marcus. She looked at him then, really looked at him, And even through the camera feed, I could see something in her eyes that made Webb take a step back. Trust me. The other human cadets tried too, in their own ways. Torres offered to accidentally spill boiling soup on XXL. Rodriguez suggested they collectively file a formal complaint. Chen refused every offer, every attempt at intervention, every hand extended in solidarity. And then she got quieter. If she had been silent before, now she became a ghost. She stopped speaking entirely during drills, stopped meeting anyone's eyes, moved through the academy like a shadow, there but not there, present but absent. I should have seen it. I should have questioned why someone would get quieter instead of louder under pressure, but I did not. None of us did. Raxthor presented his assessment to me with barely concealed satisfaction. The human female has been successfully conditioned, Commander. She understands her limitations now. The Krellian method proves superior once again. They send us raw material. We show them reality and the weak ones accept their place. Kress nodded in agreement beside him, making notes. Perhaps we were too harsh in our initial judgment. She has learned humility at least. That is something. I watched the training ground through my office window, seeing Mira run solo drills in the pre-dawn darkness, moving with mechanical precision. I felt something uncomfortable twist in my gut, something that might have been guilt or might have been doubt. Yes, I said slowly, still watching her solitary figure on the grounds below. She has certainly learned something. I had no idea how right I was, or how utterly wrong my interpretation would prove to be. I thought we had taught her a lesson about strength and weakness, about hierarchy and order. Turned out she was the one doing the teaching. We were just too arrogant to realize we were the students. The simulation chamber was a sprawling maze of adjustable environments, capable of recreating everything from urban warfare to zero-gravity combat. For the midterm evaluation, Raxthor had programmed a scenario that typically made fourth-year cadets weep into their meal trays, capture the objective, hold it for 10 minutes against overwhelming opposition, extract with minimal casualties. Simple in theory, brutal in execution. Teams were randomized by the Academy's central computer to prevent favoritism and ensure cadets learned to work with unfamiliar squadmates. When the assignments flashed on the main display, I heard Kress make a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a cough. Squad 7. Mira Chen listed as team leader, 3 Krellian cadets, 1 Vexian, and 2 other humans who looked at their assigned commander with expressions somewhere between confusion and concern. Their opponents, Squad 2, led by Thexel himself, composed entirely of senior Krellian cadets who had been training together for 3 cycles. The elite, the pride of my academy. Well, Raxthor said beside me, mandibles clicking with amusement. This will be educational for the humans at least. A thorough defeat builds character. I settled into my observation chair, pulling up the overhead tactical display. The squads entered the simulation from opposite ends. I watched the blue markers representing Squad 7 move into the maze. Standard formation, careful progress, nothing unusual. And then Mira spoke. Her voice came through the communication channel clear and calm, like she had been speaking every day instead of maintaining near total silence for weeks. Corvin, Plex, take the left corridor, advance to Junction 7 and hold. Do not engage, just observe and report. Thrace, Martinez, you are on me, center route. Jessic, she addressed the Vexian, whose species were known for their climbing abilities, vertical access, rooftops, you are our eyes. I sat up straighter in my chair. Something in her tone, that absolute certainty, caught my attention. The Krellian cadets on her team hesitated. Corvin's voice came back sharp with disrespect. You expect us to follow your orders, human? We should be leading this. Junction 7, Mira repeated, her tone unchanged, like she was reading a technical manual. Move now. You have 45 seconds before their scout reaches optimal firing position on your current trajectory. If you want to fail, argue. If you want to win, move. Something in her voice, that absolute certainty, made them move. I leaned forward, suddenly very interested in what was about to happen. Thexal's squad was advancing in their standard pattern, aggressive and confident, using superior firepower and coordination to overwhelm opponents. It had worked for them in every previous simulation. I had watched Thexal demolish dozens of teams with these exact tactics. It lasted 4 minutes. I watched, my mandibles going still with concentration, as Mira's orders came in steady streams, each one precise and unnervingly accurate. She predicted Thexel's movements before he made them, positioned her squad in places that should not have been advantages but somehow were, turned the enemy's strengths into fatal overextensions. When Thexel tried to flank left, he ran straight into Corvin's ambush. When he redirected to the center, Martinez was waiting with a firing solution that eliminated 3 targets in 2 seconds. "Commander," Cress whispered beside me, her musical voice tinged with something that might have been disbelief. "She is reading them. Every move Thexel makes, she is already 10 steps ahead." I could not respond. I was too busy watching the tactical display, watching this supposedly mediocre, broken, silent human cadet dismantle one of our best squads like she had written the simulation herself. The Vexian, Jessic, called out positions from above with perfect timing, and Mira processed the information instantly, adjusting tactics faster than I had seen any cadet manage, faster than some of my instructors could manage. The objective was captured in 6 minutes. Squad 7 held it without losing a single member. Exal's elite unit was eliminated to the last cadet, their simulation armor registering fatal hits from angles they never saw coming. When the simulation ended, the chamber fell silent. I stared at the results display, reading the numbers over and over, trying to find the error, the glitch, the explanation that made sense. Mira's squad stared at her like they had just watched a magic trick and could not figure out the mechanism. My observation deck was equally quiet. Raxthor broke the silence with a dismissive gesture that I could tell was forced. Luck. The randomizer favored her with terrain advantages. Thaxmore was overconfident. Anomalies happen. But I was not listening to my drill instructor anymore. I was watching the replay, frame by frame, seeing the way Mira had moved, the precision of her timing, the surgical efficiency of her decisions. This was not luck. This was not an anomaly. This was skill that had been deliberately hidden. "Pull up her training records," I ordered Cress quietly, my voice tight. "All of them. Every drill, every exercise, every evaluation since she arrived." "Commander." "Just do it, Lieutenant." Because I had just realized something terrifying. That blank expression, that silence, that complete lack of resistance to the hazing. What if it had never been weakness at all? What if she had been watching us, learning us, waiting for exactly the right moment to show what silence really meant? My gut twisted again, but this time it was not guilt or doubt. It was fear. Pure, instinctive fear that I had just seen a predator drop its camouflage, and I had been standing in its territory the entire time without realizing it. "Commander," Cress said softly, pulling up the data I had requested. "You should see this." I looked at the screens she was preparing and I felt my world begin to shift beneath me. We had not broken Mira Chen. We had given her exactly what she needed. I spent the entire night cycle in my office, surrounded by holographic displays that painted my Catan in flickering blue light. 7 weeks of footage, hundreds of hours of training data, every recorded moment of Mira Chen's time at my academy, playing out in overlapping windows that made my eyes ache. I started with the obvious. Her combat performances, those perfectly average scores that had convinced everyone she was mediocre at best. But when I analyzed the data more carefully, patterns emerged that made my mandibles click in growing unease. Week 1. Hand-to-hand combat. Mira lost every match but never the same way twice. Each loss came from a different technique, a different approach. I watched her absorb a throw from Instructor Bektar, saw the way her eyes tracked the movement even as she hit the mat. The next day, during free practice, there she was in the corner, drilling that exact counter move alone, unobserved until her muscles memorized the motion. I rewound the footage 3 times, not believing what I was seeing. Week 2. Tactical simulations. Her scores were consistently in the 50th percentile, nothing remarkable. But I noticed something else, something that made my stomach drop. In every simulation, regardless of her own performance, she positioned herself where she could observe the entire battlefield. Not the best tactical position for personal success, but the perfect vantage point for gathering information about everyone else's methods. "Oh no," I said softly to my empty office. "Oh no, no, no." I pulled up the footage from week 3, the hazing, those nights when Thexel and his pack had cornered her. I watched again as they postured and threatened, as they demonstrated our species' natural intimidation behaviors, and there was Mira, standing perfectly still, her eyes moving in micro-adjustments, tracking each cadet's stance, their tells, the way they shifted weight before striking the wall beside her head. She had not been frozen in fear. She had been cataloging threat responses. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled up more files. I had been a commander for 20 cycles. I had seen psychological warfare, infiltration tactics, intelligence-gathering operations, but this was something I had never encountered. Not on a training ground, not from a cadet who was supposed to be learning from us. Cress arrived at dawn, summoned by my urgent message. She took one look at the displays surrounding me and her bioluminescent markings flickered with alarm. "Commander, have you been here all night? You look— Watch this." I pulled up a compilation I had spent 3 hours assembling, my voice hoarse from lack of rest. "This is every mealtime for the past 7 weeks. Watch Chen's position in the commissary." The footage played at accelerated speed. Every single meal, Mira sat in a different location, never the same table twice. Always with clear sight lines to different groups of cadets. "She rotates," Cress said slowly, understanding dawning in her voice. "Deliberately. She is positioning herself to observe different squads during their unguarded moments. Now watch this." I switched to training ground footage, my stomach churning with the implications. Notice anything about her running patterns? Mira ran the obstacle courses at an unremarkable pace, but her routes varied constantly. She took different approaches, tested different techniques, sometimes even deliberately choosing inefficient paths. "She is experimenting," Cress breathed, moving closer to the screens, testing the equipment, learning its limitations and tolerances. "Commander, she is not training herself. She is training her understanding of the environment." I felt sick. Actually physically sick. I pulled up the library access logs next, the evidence mounting like stones on my chest. She has checked out every manual on Krellian combat doctrine available to cadets, some of them multiple times. Plus tactical analyses of Vexian climbing techniques, human endurance strategies, even historical accounts of Academy war games going back 15 cycles. That is more reading than most instructors complete in a full tour," Cress said, her voice faint with shock. "There is more." I could barely get the words out. I cross-referenced her movements with training schedules. Every time she disappeared, every moment we thought she was hiding or sulking or broken, she was in the simulation archives, reviewing recordings of past exercises. She has watched hundreds of hours of Krellian combat footage. She knows our patterns better than we know them ourselves. I felt exposed. Violated even. We had thought we were training her, testing her, breaking her. Instead, she had been studying us like we were specimens in a laboratory. I pulled up one final piece of evidence, the one that made everything click into place with horrible clarity. The psychological evaluation from her intake, the one that had flagged her as unsuitable for command. I read the relevant passage aloud, my voice hollow. "Cadet Chen demonstrates extreme observational behaviors and preference for information gathering over social interaction. Recommended use in intelligence or analysis roles, not frontline command positions." The two of us stared at each other in the dim office light. I saw my own horror reflected in Cress's luminescent markings. "We did not break her," Cress said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "We gave her exactly what she needed: time, access, and the fatal assumption that she was not a threat." I thought about those weeks of hazing, how Mira had never fought back, never complained, never shown fear. I had interpreted it as weakness, as a broken spirit accepting defeat. But now I saw it for what it truly was. Patience. The most terrifying kind of patience. The kind that predators used when stalking prey. The kind that required absolute confidence in eventual victory. She had let us hurt her, let us isolate her, let us think we had won, because every moment we spent tormenting her was a moment we revealed ourselves completely. She had weaponized our cruelty into intelligence. "That simulation yesterday," I said quietly, my voice shaking slightly. "That was not luck. That was not beginner's fortune. That was a demonstration." "A demonstration of what?" Cress asked, though I suspected she already knew the answer. I pulled up the feed from the current morning training session. There was Mira, already on the grounds in the pre-dawn darkness, running drills with the same unremarkable competence as always. But now I could see the truth beneath the performance. The way she glanced at security camera positions, the micro-adjustments in her stance that tested muscle memory, the absolute control in every movement. A demonstration, I said, feeling the weight of my own arrogance crushing down on me that she has been holding back the entire time. That performance yesterday, where she dismantled Thaxel's squad, that was her being polite. Imagine what she could do if she stopped being polite. Cress's bioluminescence flickered through several colors that indicated fear. What do we do, Commander? I watched Mira complete her drill and walk calmly toward the barracks, her face as blank and unreadable as ever. For the first time in my 20 cycles of service, I felt genuinely uncertain. We watch, Lieutenant, very, very carefully, because I think the real lesson is about to begin, and we are not going to be the ones teaching it. I had built my career on the belief that the Krellian method was superior, that our brutal training created the best warriors in the coalition, that strength and aggression and dominance were the paths to victory. Mira Chen had spent 7 weeks silently proving that every single one of those beliefs was dangerously incomplete. And the truly terrifying part, I suspected she was not done yet. The final evaluation was legendary at my academy. Not a simulation this time, but live combat exercises with pain compliance weapons that hurt like hell but left no permanent damage. Cadets faced rotating scenarios designed to test everything they had learned, usually in teams of 4 against instructor-controlled opposition forces. When Raxthor announced the parameters at morning formation, Mira raised her hand. I was watching from the command balcony, and I actually felt my breath catch in my throat. The entire assembly ground went silent. She had not volunteered for anything, had not spoken unprompted in front of a group since her arrival. Every cadet, every instructor, every observer turned to stare at this human who had been so thoroughly broken that she barely registered as present anymore. Except now I knew better. Now I knew what that silence really meant. Yes, Cadet Chen. Raxthor's voice dripped with condescension. Permission to attempt the evaluation solo. Instructor. The silence stretched longer. Then Thexlaw laughed, that chittering sound that rippled through the Krellian cadets like a wave. The prey animal thinks she is ready to hunt alone. How precious. Mira did not look at him. Her eyes stayed fixed on Raxthor, patient and empty and waiting. But I could see it now, that slight tilt to her head, that microscopic adjustment in her posture. She was observing Thexel's reaction, cataloging it, adding it to whatever vast database she had compiled in that terrifyingly efficient human mind. Cress leaned close, her voice urgent in my ear. Commander, you should deny this request. If she fails badly, it could create a diplomatic incident with the human delegation. They sent their cadets here in good faith. Approved, I said, surprising myself. Commander, I want to see what happens. I needed to see what happens. I needed to know if my suspicions were correct, if this quiet human really was as dangerous as I now believed, or if I had let paranoia and sleeplessness twist my perception into something irrational. What happened was educational, in the most terrifying possible way. The evaluation grounds were a 10-square-kilometer zone of mixed terrain, urban structures, forest analogs, and open killing fields. The opposition force consisted of 12 veteran cadets and 2 instructors, armed with pain compliance weapons and authorized to use any tactical approach short of causing permanent injury. The objective was simple: survive for 30 minutes while completing 3 randomly assigned tasks: retrieval, reconnaissance, and target elimination. I watched from the command observation post as Mira walked into the zone alone, carrying standard loadout, no special equipment, no advantages. She looked small against the sprawling landscape, fragile even, just one human in light armor against an entire hunting pack. My claws dug into the armrest of my command chair. The first 5 minutes were quiet. The opposition force spread out in standard search patterns, confident and methodical. I had my eyes locked on the drone feeds, tracking Mira as she moved through the urban sector with careful steps. Then she vanished. Not metaphorically. She literally disappeared from observation. One moment she was crossing an open plaza, the next moment gone. The drone operators scrambled, checking feeds, recalibrating sensors. She found the blind spots, I said softly, my voice tight with realization. She knows where every camera cannot see. Because of course she did. She had been watching security footage for 7 weeks. She knew my surveillance system better than the technicians who maintained it. The opposition force converged on her last known position, moving in coordinated fire teams, Textbook Krellian tactics. My tactics, the ones I had spent 2 decades perfecting. They entered the building she had disappeared into. Weapons ready. Communication discipline perfect. The building's fire suppression system activated without warning, flooding the corridors with foam that stuck to Chetan like glue and reduced visibility to arm's length. In the chaos, 3 cadets registered hit markers on their armor, pain compliance weapons fired from angles that should not have existed. I leaned forward so far, I nearly fell out of my chair. Maintenance shafts. She is using the maintenance shafts. Too small for Krellian physiology, Kress said beside me, understanding clicking into place. But perfectly sized for human flexibility. First task complete, one of my technicians called out. She retrieved the objective item during the confusion. Time elapsed, 7 minutes. 7 minutes. It typically took teams 15 minutes just to locate the objective. The opposition force regrouped, and I could see their anger even through the drone feeds. Their formation was tighter now, more aggressive. They moved into the forest sector, where Krellian enhanced senses gave us natural advantages. Sight, smell, hearing, all superior to human baselines. They would find her easily here. Except Mira was already gone, circling back through the urban zone, using their aggressive repositioning to create gaps in their coverage. I watched, my mandibles hanging open in shock, as she infiltrated the reconnaissance target, a fortified position that should have required a full team to crack, by simply walking through the maintenance entrance that my instructors had dismissed as too obvious to bother guarding. No one uses the obvious approach, I muttered, seeing the brilliance of it. So the obvious approach becomes invisible. Second task complete, the technician announced. Time elapsed, 16 minutes. Commander, she is dismantling this evaluation like she wrote the scenario herself. She might as well have, I replied, my voice hollow. She has watched 15 cycles worth of academy evaluations. She knows every pattern we use, every tactical doctrine we teach, every assumption we make about how combat should flow. My academy, my methods, my patterns. All of it turned against us by someone who had spent weeks being quiet enough that we forgot she was learning. The final task was target elimination. She had to register a hit on the evaluation commander, Instructor Bektar himself, a veteran of actual combat who had never lost an evaluation match in 8 cycles of teaching. I watched as Mira stopped running, stopped hiding. She walked into the open killing field, visible to every drone, every observer, every opposition force member, just stood there in the middle of empty ground, completely exposed. What is she doing? Kress demanded beside me. She is giving up her advantages, she is. Using bait, I said, my heart pounding in my chest. I could see it now, see the trap being laid. She is using herself as bait. Bektar's tactical marker moved rapidly toward the obvious target, the entire opposition force converging for an easy victory. They thought they had her. They thought it was over. I held my breath. Mira dropped flat 1 second before the entire force entered optimal firing range. The paint marker round she had positioned earlier, rigged to a timer and hidden in the grass, detonated upward in a spray pattern that registered hits on 7 cadets simultaneously. In the confusion, she rolled, came up in a firing stance that was textbook perfect despite never being textbook Krellian, and put 3 shots into Bektar's chest plate from 30 meters out. Third task complete. The technician's voice was barely a whisper. Total time, 23 minutes. She just defeated our entire evaluation protocol with 7 minutes to spare. But I was not watching the tactical display anymore. I was watching the live feed of Mira standing alone in that field, surrounded by the opposition force who were too shocked to even move. And for the first time since arriving at my academy, she smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of something that had been playing prey, letting the predators feel confident and superior and safe, before revealing that the roles had been reversed from the very beginning. She had let them break her, because broken things get underestimated. She had let them win, because winners get arrogant. She had studied every second of her humiliation, catalogued every slight, learned from every defeat, and turned it all into a weapon they never saw coming. I felt something crack inside my chest. Pride, maybe, or certainty. 20 cycles of believing I knew what made a warrior, what made strength, what made victory possible. All of it shattered by one quiet human who understood that the greatest weapon was not strength or speed or aggression. It was patience, and observation, and the willingness to let your enemy think they had already won. Texel, watching from the cadet observation area, made a sound that I had never heard a Krellian make before. It might have been respect. It might have been fear. Probably both. I slumped back in my command chair, feeling exhausted and enlightened and terrified all at once. Mira Chen had just taught my academy a lesson that would echo through every future training cycle. Silence was not surrender. Quiet was not weakness. And the most dangerous predator was the one you convinced yourself was prey. She had not been broken at all. She had been sharpening herself on our cruelty, and now we all knew exactly how sharp she had become. I called Mira to my office 3 days after the evaluation. She entered with that same economical movement, stood at attention with perfect posture and waited. Always waiting, always watching. I gestured to the chair across from my desk with one claw. "Sit, Cadet Chen. This is not a disciplinary meeting." She sat, folded her hands in her lap, and looked at me with those dark eyes that I now understood, saw far more than anyone had given her credit for. I felt exposed under that gaze, like she was still cataloging, still learning, still adding data to whatever conclusions she had already drawn about me. "I owe you an apology," I said, the words tasting strange in my mouth. Krellian commanders did not apologize to cadets. But then again, Krellian commanders were not usually so catastrophically wrong about everything. "We mistook your silence for submission. We interpreted your patience as weakness. We saw what we expected to see instead of what was actually there." Mira tilted her head slightly, a gesture I had seen her make 1,000 times in the footage. Listening, processing, deciding how much to reveal. "Permission to speak freely, Commander." Granted. I needed to hear this. I needed to understand how thoroughly I had been outmaneuvered in my own academy. "You were supposed to think that," she said simply, her voice calm and matter-of-fact. "All of you. That was the point." I felt my mandibles click involuntarily. Of course it was. "Explain." Mira leaned back in the chair, and for the first time since arriving at my academy, she looked genuinely relaxed. The mask had dropped, just slightly, and I could see the intelligence that had been hiding behind that blank expression for 7 weeks. "Where I come from, we have a saying, the lion does not concern itself with the opinions of sheep, but humans. We are not lions, we are not the biggest or the strongest or the most naturally armed. What we are, Commander, is adaptable, and adaptation requires information." She glanced at the window overlooking the training grounds where cadets were running morning drills. I followed her gaze, seeing my academy through new eyes. When I arrived here, I had 2 choices. I could be loud like Marcus and the others, prove myself through aggression and confidence and force everyone to acknowledge me, or I could be invisible, unremarkable, not worth paying attention to. "So you chose to be prey," I said, my voice hollow. "I chose to be underestimated," she corrected. And I heard the distinction clearly now. There is a difference. Prey runs. I never ran. I stayed perfectly still while predators circled, and I learned everything about how they hunt. Every cadet who mocked me showed me their sense of superiority and where it made them vulnerable. Every instructor who dismissed me revealed their assumptions about what makes a warrior. Every drill I performed at average levels taught me exactly what standard performance looked like, so I would know how to exceed it when necessary. I felt my claws dig into the armrests of my chair. She had played us, all of us, and we had let her, because we were too arrogant to imagine that silence could be strategy. Cress, standing by the door, made that musical sound of distress. "You manipulated us. Deliberately." "I collected data," Mira said, her voice still calm, still matter-of-fact, and somehow that made it worse. "Silence is not weakness, Lieutenant. Silence is a tool. While everyone else is talking, announcing their intentions, revealing their strategies, I am listening, learning, cataloging patterns." By the time I spoke during that simulation, I knew more about Krellian combat doctrine than some of your instructors, not because I am smarter, but because I was quieter. The truth of it hit me like a physical blow. I thought about the report I had to file with Coalition Command. How did I explain that the cadet we had mentally categorized as a failure had systematically dissected my academy's entire training program and turned it into her own private education? How did I admit that weeks of hazing had accomplished nothing except giving her unlimited access to study her opponents? How did I tell the coalition that we had been teaching humans our weaknesses while thinking we were demonstrating our strengths? Humans are dangerous, I said slowly, understanding settling into my bones like cold water. Not because of your death world resilience or your endurance or your adaptability. You are dangerous because you can make us believe you are not dangerous at all. Mira smiled, that same unsettling smile from the evaluation field. It was the smile of a predator who no longer needed to hide. Every species in the coalition is stronger than us in some way. Krellians have better armor, better natural weapons. Vexians can climb anything. Thracians can see in spectrums we cannot imagine. But humans, Commander, we are very good at watching stronger things, learning how they work and finding the one weak point that makes all that strength irrelevant. My mandibles went still. Is that a threat, Cadet? It is an observation, sir. She stood, moved back to attention, and I saw the shift happen. The mask sliding back into place, the blank expression returning, like she was showing me exactly how easily she could become invisible again. The same observation I hope you include in your report to Coalition Command. When you encounter a quiet human, one who watches more than they speak, who seems content to let others lead and dominate and win, do not assume they are weak. Consider the possibility that they are simply not done learning yet. I watched her leave, this human who had taught my academy a lesson in humility, wrapped in patience. The door closed behind her with a soft hiss, and I turned to my terminal. My claws hovered over the keyboard for a long moment. 20 cycles of service. 20 cycles of believing I understood warfare. Training, what made warriors effective. All of it questioned by 7 weeks, with one quiet human. I began typing the final assessment, knowing it would change how the Coalition viewed human psychological warfare capabilities forever, knowing it would make me look foolish, knowing I had no choice but to tell the truth. Cadet Mira Chen demonstrates advanced intelligence-gathering instincts masked by deliberate performance of mediocrity. Assessment. Humans who present as non-threatening should be considered highest threat level precisely because of this presentation. Silence is not surrender. Observation is not passivity. The quiet ones are not broken. They are waiting. And when they stop waiting, you will discover they were never prey at all. I paused, my claws trembling slightly over the keys, then continued. Recommend immediate revision of threat assessment protocols for human integration across all Coalition military programs. We have been evaluating them incorrectly. They have been evaluating us perfectly. The Krellian method of breaking recruits through psychological pressure and hazing does not work on humans who understand that pain is temporary, but information is permanent. We believed we were teaching them our superiority. They were learning our predictability. I stopped, read what I had written, and felt the weight of my own arrogance crushing down on me. But there was more that needed to be said, more that Coalition Command needed to understand. Personal observation from Commander Voth. I have served this academy for 20 cycles. I have trained thousands of warriors. I believed I understood what made strength, what made victory, what made a soldier effective. Cadet Chen has proven that every assumption I held was dangerously incomplete. She did not win through superior strength, or speed, or natural advantages. She won through patience, observation, and the willingness to endure humiliation while gathering intelligence. This is not a weakness in human psychology. This is a weapon we have no defense against, because it requires us to fundamentally change how we perceive threat itself. I submitted the report and sat back in my chair, staring at the training grounds through my window. Cadets were running drills below, following patterns I had established, using methods I had perfected over 2 decades. And somewhere down there, Mira Chen was probably watching them, learning them, adding to whatever database she maintained in that terrifyingly efficient mind. I wondered how many other quiet humans were scattered across Coalition space right now, watching, learning, waiting for the moment to show what silence really meant. The answer, I suspected, would terrify anyone who bothered to look for it. Because we had invited them in. We had given them access to our academies, our methods, our patterns of thinking. We had assumed that because they were physically weaker, technologically younger, politically newer to the galactic stage, that they were less dangerous. Mira Chen had spent 7 weeks proving that assumption was not just wrong. It was fatal. I clicked my mandibles softly. alone in my office, and admitted something I had never thought I would say. The humans had not come to our academy to learn from us. They had come to learn us. And now that they had, I was not sure the rest of the galaxy was ready for what came next.